The polished brass buttons of Captain Beatrice Ellis's uniform caught the afternoon sun as she stood at attention outside the Imperial Council chambers. Her posture was perfect, spine straight, shoulders squared, chin level, just as it had been for the 6 hours prior. The ceremonial saber at her hip weighed heavily after such prolonged standing, but she betrayed no discomfort. As captain of Empress Theodora's personal guard, weakness was not an option. Through the ornate double doors, she could hear the muffled voices of the Austro-Hungarian Empire's highest officials debating the growing unrest in the Balkans. The year 1908 had brought the annexation of Bosnia-Herzegovina and with it, a tension that seemed to permeate the very walls of the Schönbrunn Palace. "Captain Ellis," came a soft voice from her left. Beatrice didn't turn her head. "Lady Charlotte. Her Imperial Majesty requests your presence in her private study after the council meeting concludes," the lady-in-waiting whispered. "Discreetly, if you please." Beatrice gave an almost imperceptible nod, her gaze remaining fixed on the gilded corridor ahead. Private meetings with the Empress were rarer still when requested with discretion. Something was amiss. The council doors swung open 3 hours later. Ministers and military officials filed out, their faces grave. Last to exit was Foreign Minister Count Leopold Berchtold, who paused before Beatrice. "Captain Ellis," he said, his voice low. "Troubling times ahead. Keep the Empress safe." Beatrice bowed slightly. "Always, Your Excellency." As the corridor emptied, she waited the appropriate amount of time before making her way to the western wing of the palace, where the Empress maintained her private apartments. 2 guards flanked the study door, both men from her own regiment. They recognized her immediately and stepped aside without question. Inside, the Empress sat at her writing desk, still dressed in the formal court attire required for council meetings, a gown of midnight blue silk adorned with silver embroidery that mimicked the night sky. Her graying hair was arranged in an intricate style that belied her 61 years. Though time had etched lines around her eyes and mouth, Theodora remained an impressive figure, one who commanded respect with a mere glance. "Captain," she said without looking up from the document before her. "Close the door." Beatrice obeyed, then stood at attention, waiting. "You've served as my guard for 7 years now," the Empress began, finally raising her eyes. "In that time, I've come to trust your judgment as much as your sword arm. I'm honored, Your Imperial Majesty. What I'm about to tell you must not leave this room." The Empress rose, crossing to a small cabinet where she retrieved a sealed envelope. "I've received intelligence that a plot against the imperial family is being organized. Not just the usual rabble-rousers, but something more coordinated, with foreign backing." Beatrice's mind raced through the implications. The Russians? Perhaps. Or the Ottomans? Or both. The Empress handed her the envelope. "Inside are the names of 3 individuals I need investigated. Quietly. Officially, you'll be reassigned to escort my grandson, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, during his upcoming tour of military installations." Beatrice accepted the envelope, her fingers steady despite the gravity of the situation. "When do I depart?" "Tomorrow. The Archduke leaves for the eastern provinces in the morning. You'll accompany him as far as Budapest, then separate to begin your true mission." The Empress paused. "I'm also assigning someone to assist you. A scholar from the Imperial Library who specializes in Eastern languages and diplomacy. You'll need his expertise." A knock at the door interrupted them. "Enter," called the Empress. The door opened to reveal a man Beatrice had never seen before. Tall and lean, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, if not in the imperial court. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his suit, while well-made, lacked the ostentation common among courtiers. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said, bowing deeply. "I came as requested." "Captain Ellis," said the Empress, "allow me to introduce Dr. Yuri Romanov, our foremost expert on Slavic languages and Eastern European politics. Dr. Romanov, this is Captain Beatrice Ellis, commander of my personal guard." Dr. Romanov straightened and met Beatrice's gaze with surprising directness. "Captain," he said with a slight nod. Doctor, she replied, taking his measure. His name suggested Russian heritage, which immediately raised questions given the current political climate. As if reading her thoughts, the Empress added, Dr. Romanov's family emigrated from St. Petersburg when he was a child. His loyalty to the Austro-Hungarian crown is beyond question. I trust him implicitly. Beatrice nodded once, though her reservations remained. In her experience, trust was earned, not granted on another's word, even the Empress's. You'll depart together, the Empress continued. Captain Ellis will brief you on the journey, Dr. Romanov. For now, both of you should prepare. The train leaves at dawn. After they were dismissed, Beatrice and Dr. Romanov walked in silence through the palace corridors. When they reached the main hall, he finally spoke. I sense you have concerns about working with me, Captain. His directness caught her off guard. Most men of his station would dance around such matters, especially with a woman, regardless of her rank. I have concerns about everything regarding this mission, Doctor. You're merely one among many. A slight smile touched his lips. Then we have that in common, at least. I'm a scholar, not a spy. This is as foreign to me as the battlefield would be. Then why did you agree to it? His expression grew serious. Because when the Empress of Austria-Hungary asks for your service, refusing isn't an option. I suspect you understand that better than most. Before she could respond, a page approached, bowing hastily. Captain Ellis, urgent message from Lieutenant Parker. Beatrice took the folded paper, quickly reading its contents. Her jaw tightened. It seems our departure may be complicated, Doctor. Someone has broken into your office at the Imperial Library. Yuri's eyes widened. When? What was taken? That's what we're going to find out. She turned to the page. Have my horse brought to the northern entrance immediately. And find Lieutenant Parker, tell him to meet us at the Imperial Library with 3 men. As they hurried through the palace, Beatrice couldn't help but wonder if the break-in was coincidental or connected to their new assignment. Either way, it confirmed her instinct that this mission would be far more dangerous than the Empress had let on. The Imperial Library stood adjacent to the palace, its neoclassical facade gleaming white against the darkening sky. When they arrived, Lieutenant James Parker was already waiting with 3 guardsmen. Captain, Parker said, saluting. We've secured the area. No one has entered or left since the break-in was discovered. Who found it? Beatrice asked as they hurried up the stone steps. One of the assistant librarians. He came to deliver some documents to Dr. Romanov and found the door forced open. Inside, the library was eerily quiet, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor. They followed Parker through the cavernous main reading room and down a corridor lined with smaller offices. Yuri's office door hung askew, the lock splintered. Inside, the room had been thoroughly ransacked. Books lay scattered across the floor, desk drawers pulled out and emptied, papers strewn everywhere. Yuri surveyed the damage with a pained expression. They were looking for something specific, he said, crouching to examine a pile of documents. How can you tell? Beatrice asked. Look at the pattern. They went through my research on the Balkans first. He pointed to a section where the chaos seemed more deliberate than my correspondence files. They ignored the literature and linguistics texts entirely. Beatrice circled the room, noting the open window that likely served as the intruder's exit. Did they find what they were looking for? Yuri stood, adjusting his spectacles as he examined his desk more closely. I don't think so, he said slowly. My most sensitive research isn't kept here. Where is it? He met her gaze, hesitation clear in his eyes. I don't think, Doctor, she cut him off. Someone broke in here hours after you were assigned to a secret mission by the Empress. This isn't coincidence. If there's something they were after that might endanger our work, I need to know now. Yuri glanced at the other guardsman, then back to Beatrice. Not here, he said quietly. She nodded. Lieutenant Parker, secure this room. Post a guard. No one enters without my express permission. She Señorita Vasquez, Beatrice said, not lowering her weapon. Breaking into private residences is typically frowned upon in diplomatic circles. Elena smiled, unconcerned by the gun pointed at her. As is threatening foreign diplomats with firearms, Captain. Yet here we are. What are you doing here? The same thing you are, I imagine. Looking for information that Dr. Romanov has collected. Elena's dark eye shifted to something over Beatrice's shoulder. Speaking of whom? Beatrice didn't turn, knowing Yuri had disobeyed her order to remain in the carriage. Go back, she said firmly. I know her, Yuri said, stepping beside Beatrice. She's been attending my lectures at the university for months. Always asking questions about my research. Elena's smile widened. You give fascinating lectures, Doctor. Particularly those on cross-border nationalist movements. Who are you working for? Beatrice demanded. Let's just say there are many interested parties when it comes to the future of the Balkans. Elena's expression grew serious. Some who would prefer to avoid a war that benefits no one except arms manufacturers and grave diggers. Beatrice considered her options. Arresting a foreign diplomat would cause an international incident, yet letting her go seemed equally unwise. Captain, Yuri said quietly, I suggest we continue this conversation inside. The street is too exposed. After a moment's hesitation, Beatrice nodded. Fine. But one false move, Señorita Vasquez, and diplomatic immunity won't save you from a bullet. Inside Yuri's apartment, a modest but well-appointed space filled with books and academic papers, the tension remained high. Beatrice kept her revolver visible as Elena settled into an armchair. Now, Beatrice said, explain yourself properly. Elena crossed her legs, completely at ease despite being at gunpoint. Spain has no direct interest in Balkan politics, which is precisely why I'm here. We're neutral observers watching a powder keg about to explode. That doesn't explain breaking into the doctor's apartment, Beatrice countered. Information is currency, Captain. I needed to know what he knows. Elena turned to Yuri. You've identified key members of the Black Hand, haven't you? Including those with connections to Austro-Hungarian military leadership. Yuri's face paled. How did you? Because others know as well. People who would prefer that information never reaches the Empress. Elena leaned forward. You're both in danger. The break-in at the library was just the beginning. Beatrice studied the woman carefully. Why warn us? What do you gain? Stability. Peace. Spain has no appetite for another European war. Elena stood, smoothing her skirt. There's a train leaving for Budapest at dawn. You won't be on it. There will be an incident, perhaps an explosion, perhaps an accidental for derailment. Either way, it's meant to eliminate both of you. The news hit Beatrice like a physical blow. You're certain of this? I stake my life on it, Elena replied. She reached into her coat and Beatrice tensed, but the Spanish woman merely extracted a small envelope. Alternative travel documents. A commercial steamer leaves from Vienna to Budapest tomorrow afternoon. It's slower but safer. Yuri took the envelope cautiously. Why help us? As I said, Spain prefers peace. Elena moved toward the door. And perhaps I find your research too valuable to lose, Doctor. The world needs men who seek truth, especially now. After she left, Beatrice locked and barricaded the door, then checked every window and possible entry point. Yuri sat at his desk, examining the documents Elena had provided. These appear authentic, he said finally. But whether we can trust her? We can't, Beatrice said firmly. But we can't dismiss her warning either. She paced the small sitting room, thinking. We need your research. Where's the key to the safety deposit box? Yuri went to a bookshelf and selected a volume of Dostoevsky. Opening it, he revealed a hollowed-out section containing a small key. Here. But retrieving the documents now would be dangerous if we're being watched. More dangerous than boarding a train that might be sabotaged. Beatrice shook her head. We'll go to the bank first thing in the morning, then take the steamer as Elena suggested. But we'll maintain the pretense of boarding the Imperial train as well.
How?
I'll arrange for Lieutenant Parker and 2 of my men to board in our place, disguised. They'll disembark secretly at the first stop. She checked her watch. It's late. You should rest. I'll take first watch. Yuri hesitated. Captain, I feel I should apologize. I didn't realize my research would put others in danger. Beatrice's expression softened slightly. You were doing your duty, Doctor. As am I. Now rest. Tomorrow will be challenging enough. As Yuri retired to his bedroom, Beatrice positioned herself near the window, revolver ready. Outside, Vienna slept under a canopy of stars, oblivious to the threats lurking in the shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were pieces in a much larger game, one whose rules and players remained frustratingly obscure. Morning came with thin grey light filtering through the curtains. Beatrice, who had allowed herself only a few hours of fitful sleep after Yuri took watch, was already dressed and preparing to leave. They had agreed to separate briefly. Yuri would retrieve his documents from the bank while Beatrice arranged the decoy at the train station. We'll meet at Heldenplatz at noon, she reminded him as they prepared to part ways. From there, we'll proceed directly to the docks. Yuri nodded, adjusting his hat. In civilian clothes, he looked younger, less formal than the scholarly figure from the palace. Be careful, Captain. If Elena's warning is accurate, whoever is watching for us won't hesitate to act. Nor will I, she replied, patting her concealed revolver. Good luck, Doctor. The Imperial train station was bustling with the usual morning crowd when Beatrice arrived. She quickly located Lieutenant Parker and pulled him aside to explain the situation. It's risky, he admitted after she outlined her plan. But feasible. Thompson and Walsh can pass as you and the Doctor from a distance. The key is to be seen boarding, but not to actually remain on the train, Beatrice emphasized. Disembark at Klosterneuburg, then return to Vienna by carriage. Parker nodded. And if someone does attempt to sabotage the train, alert the station master immediately. There will be innocent passengers aboard. Beatrice handed him a sealed letter. If anything happens to the Doctor or me, deliver this directly to the Empress. It explains everything we know. With arrangements in place, Beatrice left the station and made her way toward Heldenplatz, taking a circuitous route to ensure she wasn't followed. The massive square stood empty in the late morning light, the equestrian statue of Archduke Charles dominating the center. Yuri was already waiting when she arrived, a leather satchel clutched tightly under his arm. His face was drawn, his usual scholarly composure replaced by evident anxiety. You have the documents? She asked as she approached. He nodded. All of them. But Captain, there's something else. When I arrived at the bank, someone had already attempted to access my box. Beatrice's blood ran cold.
How?
Who? The clerk didn't know. Just that a man had come earlier claiming to be me, but couldn't produce the proper identification. When I pressed for details, the clerk became evasive. I think he was frightened. We need to move. Now. Beatrice scanned the square, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. The steamer leaves in 2 hours. We'll take side streets to a sharp crack split the air. Instinctively, Beatrice shoved Yuri down behind the base of the statue as a bullet struck the stone where they had been standing. Stay down, she ordered, drawing her revolver and peering cautiously around the edge of the monument. The shot had come from the direction of the Hofburg Palace, likely from one of the upper windows with a clear view of the square. We're trapped, Yuri whispered, clutching his satchel. They'll have the exits covered. Beatrice's mind raced. He was right, the square had limited exits, all easily watched by whoever was targeting them. But she knew the palace and its surroundings better than most. There's a service tunnel, she said, used by the Imperial staff to move between the palace and the outer buildings. The entrance is behind the monument, 20 paces to the north. When I give the signal, run for it. Don't stop, Don't look back. Wait! Beatrice called, producing the documents Elena had provided. We have passage. The first mate examined their papers with a suspicious eye, noting their disheveled appearance and Beatrice's poorly concealed injury, but eventually nodded. Very well. Board quickly, we're behind schedule. Once aboard, they were shown to a small private cabin on the lower deck. As soon as the door closed behind them, Beatrice sagged against the wall, the adrenaline that had kept her going now ebbing away to reveal the full extent of her exhaustion and pain. Yuri immediately went to her side. Let me see your arm. It's fine, she protested, but allowed him to help her remove her coat. The makeshift bandage was soaked through with blood. This needs proper attention, he said, his voice firm. Sit down. To her own surprise, Beatrice complied, watching as Yuri efficiently located the cabin's first aid supplies and began cleaning her wound with gentle, practiced movements. You've done this before, she observed. A sad smile crossed his face. My father was a physician. He insisted I learn basic medical skills. Said knowledge was worthless if not practical. He carefully applied antiseptic, apologizing when she winced. During university, I volunteered at a clinic in the poorer districts. Before languages and politics became my focus. As he worked, Beatrice studied him with new eyes. There was more to Dr. Yuri Romanov than the scholarly exterior suggested, a depth of experience and character she hadn't anticipated. Thank you, she said quietly when he finished bandaging her arm. It's the least I can do, considering you've saved my life twice today. He sat beside her on the narrow bench that would convert to a bed later. May I ask you something personal, Captain? Beatrice raised an eyebrow. You may ask. I may not answer. Fair enough. Yuri hesitated. How did you come to be in the Imperial Guard? It's not a common position for a woman, even one as capable as yourself. The question caught her off guard. Few people inquired about her past, and fewer still received answers. Yet something about the moment, the privacy of the cabin, the gentle sway of the boat as it moved down the Danube, the shared danger they'd just escaped, lowered her usual defenses. My father was a colonel in the Imperial Cavalry, she began. He had no sons, but he taught me riding and shooting from the time I could walk. When I was 16, he was killed in a border skirmish with Russian forces. My mother had died years earlier, so I was left alone with no prospects and little money. Yuri listened intently, his eyes never leaving her face. The Empress knew my father. He had once saved the life of her nephew during a hunting accident. When she heard of my situation, she arranged for me to receive military training, unofficially at first. I was assigned to the Palace Guard, where I could be kept out of sight but still serve. Over time, I proved myself useful enough that my presence became accepted, if not always welcomed. And you rose to captain, Yuri said with admiration. Beatrice smiled faintly. It took 10 years and twice the effort any man would have needed. But yes, I became captain. The Empress's personal guard for the last 7 years. She trusts you implicitly. As I trust her. Beatrice straightened, pushing away the momentary vulnerability. Now, Doctor, I believe it's time you showed me exactly what's in that satchel that's worth killing for. Yuri carefully opened the leather bag and removed several folders of documents. He spread them across the small table built into the cabin wall. These are communications between Serbian nationalist groups and sympathizers within the Austro-Hungarian military and government, he explained, pointing to one stack. Names, dates, planned actions. And these, he indicated another folder, are financial records showing funding from sources in both Russia and the Ottoman Empire. Beatrice leaned forward, scanning the pages. These names, some are high-ranking officers, even members of the imperial court. Yes. Which is why retrieving this information was so dangerous. The conspiracy extends further than anyone realized. Yuri removed a final, thinner folder. But this is the most concerning. Evidence of a planned assassination attempt against Archduke Franz Ferdinand during his upcoming visit to Sarajevo. Beatrice took the document with a growing sense of dread. This is dated 3 months ago. They've been planning this for some time. And with support from people within our own government. Yuri met her gaze. Now you understand why someone would risk shooting at us in Heldenplatz. If this information reaches the Empress, traitors would be exposed. Careers and lives destroyed. Beatrice carefully returned the papers to the satchel. We need to reach Budapest without further incident. From there, we can send an encrypted telegram to the palace and arrange secure transport back to Vienna. As the steamer made its way down the Danube, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the water. Beatrice stood by the cabin's small window, watching the Austrian countryside slide by. The events of the day had left her more shaken than she cared to admit, not just from the physical danger, but from the implications of what they discovered. You should rest, Yuri said, joining her at the window. I'll keep watch. I'm fine. You've lost blood, barely slept last night, and spent the day running for your life, he pointed out reasonably. Even the captain of the Imperial Guard needs rest occasionally. Before she could argue further, a knock at the cabin door put them both on alert. Beatrice motioned for Yuri to stand aside with the satchel while she drew her revolver and approached the door. Yes, she called. Dinner service, madam, came a muffled voice. For you and the gentleman. Beatrice exchanged a glance with Yuri. They hadn't ordered any food. We didn't request dinner, she replied cautiously. Compliments of a fellow passenger. A Señorita Vasquez. Elena. Somehow, the Spanish diplomat had followed them onto the steamer. Beatrice carefully opened the door a crack, revolver hidden behind it, to find a steward with a covered tray. After inspecting the corridor and finding it empty, she allowed him to place the tray on the table before dismissing him. Under the silver cover was a simple meal of roast chicken, bread, and wine, along with a folded note. The train to Budapest was indeed sabotaged, Beatrice read aloud from the note. Explosion at Klosterneuburg station. No fatalities reported, but several injuries. Your lieutenant was clever enough to disembark before it happened. Meet me in the dining salon at 9 p.m. for further information. Come alone. She looked up at Yuri. Signed, E. A trap? Yuri suggested. Perhaps. But Elena has been right so far. Beatrice checked her watch. It's nearly 8 now. We should eat, then I'll go meet her. You'll stay here with the documents. That's not happening, Yuri said firmly, surprising her with his tone. I'm not letting you face potential danger alone while I hide in a cabin. It's not about hiding, Doctor. It's about protecting the information, which I can do while accompanying you, he interrupted. We stay together, Captain. That's not negotiable. Beatrice stared at him, unused to having her orders questioned. Yet she couldn't deny the logic of his argument, nor the determination in his eyes. Fine, she conceded. But you follow my lead and stay behind me if anything happens. Agreed. They ate quickly, the food reminding them both how long it had been since their last meal. By 8:45, they were making their way through the steamer toward the dining salon, Beatrice with her revolver concealed but accessible, Yuri with the crucial documents hidden inside his jacket. The dining salon was elegant but modestly appointed, with tables set far enough apart to allow private conversation. Only a few passengers remained at this hour, most having retired to their cabins. Elena sat alone at a corner table, sipping what appeared to be sherry. She smiled as they approached. I said come alone, Captain. Consider yourself fortunate we came at all, Beatrice replied, taking a seat while positioning herself to watch both Elena and the entrance. Yuri sat beside her. Elena seemed amused rather than offended. Direct as always. I appreciate that about you. She set down her glass. I imagine you'd like to know how I found you. Among other things. I placed a small identification mark on the documents I gave you. When they were presented to board this vessel, I was alerted. She shrugged elegantly. Simple precaution. And the train bombing? Yuri asked. Elena's expression grew serious. Exactly as I warned. A relatively small explosion, strategic. Yuri nodded, sitting on the edge of his bed. In the dim light of the cabin's single lamp, his features seemed softer, the scholarly reserve giving way to evident fatigue. "You should sleep," Beatrice said, echoing his earlier advice to her. "I'll take first watch." "Are we taking watches on a commercial steamer?" he asked with a small smile. "After today?" "Absolutely." But she returned his smile briefly. "For hours, then we switch." As Yuri settled onto his bed, Beatrice took up position near the door, her back against the wall, knees drawn up. The events of the day replayed in her mind as she tried to make sense of the larger picture forming. Something about Elena's explanation felt incomplete, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly what troubled her. Hours passed in silence. Occasionally, footsteps would pass their door as other passengers moved about the ship, but nothing raised her suspicions. Yuri slept soundly, his breathing deep and regular. Watching him, Beatrice found herself wondering about the path that had brought him from a physician's son to imperial scholar to her unexpected partner in this dangerous mission. There was something endearing about his quiet determination, his willingness to stand firm even against her authority when principles demanded it. Most men either dismissed her abilities entirely or tried to impress her with false bravado. Yuri did neither. Shaking off these uncharacteristic thoughts, Beatrice refocused on their situation. Tomorrow in Budapest would bring new challenges. She needed to be ready. When 4 hours had passed, she gently woke Yuri for his watch. As they traded places, their hands accidentally touched, sending an unexpected warmth through her fingers. Beatrice quickly withdrew, attributing the sensation to fatigue and stress. "Wake me if anything happens," she instructed, settling onto her bed. "Anything at all?" "Of course." Yuri took up her position by the door. "Rest well, Captain." Beatrice closed her eyes, intending only to doze lightly, but exhaustion claimed her completely. For the first time in years, she slept deeply without waking at every sound, as if some part of her had decided Yuri Romanov was trustworthy enough to truly rest in his presence. She dreamed of the Empress's garden, of walking paths lined with roses, and of a hand holding hers, a scholar's hand, with ink-stained fingers that somehow felt more right than any touch she had known before. Morning came with a gentle knock at their cabin door. Beatrice woke instantly, reaching for her revolver before registering Yuri already up and dressed, looking out the small window. "We're approaching Budapest," he informed her. "The steward says we'll dock within the hour." Beatrice rose quickly, smoothing her rumpled uniform as best she could. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough." Yuri handed her a cup of coffee he must have acquired while she slept. "I thought you might need this." The gesture was unexpectedly considerate. "Thank you," she said, accepting the cup gratefully. The coffee was strong and sweetened exactly as she preferred. "How did you know?" "I've been paying attention," he replied with a slight smile. As they prepared to disembark, Beatrice reviewed their plan. "We meet Elena's contact, but cautiously. If anything seems suspicious, we separate and rendezvous at the Imperial Consulate." Yuri nodded, patting his jacket where the documents were secured. "And if the contact is legitimate? Then we get a message to Vienna as quickly as possible." Beatrice checked her appearance one final time. Her uniform was wrinkled and her arms still ached, but she looked presentable enough. "Ready, Doctor." "After you, Captain." The Budapest docks were bustling with morning activity as they disembarked. Stevedores unloaded cargo while passengers reunited with waiting family members or sought transportation into the city. Among the crowd, Beatrice spotted Elena speaking with a tall, distinguished-looking man in a well-cut suit. "There," she murmured to Yuri, nodding in their direction. As they approached, Elena saw them and smiled. "Ah, our fellow travelers. Did you sleep well?" Without waiting for an answer, she turned to her companion. "Allow me to introduce Mr. Theodore Manning, British Consul to Budapest." The man extended his hand. "A pleasure, though I understand the circumstances are less than ideal." Beatrice shook his hand cautiously. A British diplomat was unexpected. "Mr. Manning." I wasn't aware Her Majesty's government was involved in this matter. Officially, we're not, Manning replied in perfect German, though his accent revealed his English origins. Unofficially, Britain has a vested interest in preventing continental destabilization. Señorita Vasquez contacted our embassy in Vienna, and my superiors thought it prudent to offer assistance. Beatrice exchanged a glance with Yuri, who gave a slight nod. The involvement of the British complicated matters but potentially provided valuable allies. I have a carriage waiting, Manning continued. We can speak more freely at the consulate. As they followed him through the crowded docks, Beatrice maintained a vigilant watch. Budapest, though part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, had its own character and politics. Hungarian nationalism ran strong here, creating additional layers of complexity to their already complicated situation. Manning's carriage was elegant but unmarked, drawn by two well-groomed bay horses. As they settled inside, Beatrice positioned herself to watch the street behind them. Paranoid by nature, Captain, or just by profession? Manning asked with what seemed genuine curiosity. Cautious, she corrected. We were shot at yesterday. It tends to sharpen one's awareness. Manning nodded soberly. Indeed. Elena has briefed me on the situation. Most troubling, especially the connection to the Archduke's planned visit to Sarajevo. We need to get this information to Vienna immediately, Yuri said. And so you shall. The consulate has secure telegraph facilities at your disposal. Manning leaned forward. But first, I believe you should know that we've intercepted communication suggesting your enemies are already aware you've reached Budapest. Beatrice tensed.
How?
The steamer captain, Elena supplied. Paid to report your arrival. Then this carriage could be followed, Beatrice said, reaching for her revolver. Manning raised a calming hand. Already accounted for, Captain. This is actually the second of 3 identical carriages that left the dock. The others contain consulate staff dressed similarly to yourselves. Simple misdirection. Despite the reassurance, Beatrice didn't relax her vigilance as they traveled through Budapest's grand avenues. The city, divided by the Danube into the hilly Buda and the flat Pest, was a showcase of Hungarian pride within the empire. Ornate buildings lined wide boulevards, and the massive Hungarian Parliament building dominated the riverside. The British consulate was housed in a stately building near the diplomatic quarter. Guards in the distinctive red uniforms of British diplomatic protection saluted as their carriage entered through wrought iron gates that closed firmly behind them. Inside, they were led to Manning's private office, a wood-paneled room filled with maps and diplomatic dispatches. A portrait of Queen Victoria still hung prominently, though Edward VII now sat on the British throne. You'll be safe here while we prepare the telegraph, Manning assured them, offering seats. Refreshments. While a consulate servant brought tea and sandwiches, Manning spread a map of Central Europe across his desk. The situation is more precarious than either of your governments publicly acknowledge, he said, his tone grave. Russia is actively supporting Serbian ambitions. Germany has pledged full support to Austria-Hungary. France is bound to Russia by treaty. And Britain cannot allow German dominance of the continent, Elena finished. The balance of power must be maintained. Precisely. Manning pointed to various regions on the map. A conflict that begins in the Balkans won't stay there. It will engulf us all. Yuri leaned forward, studying the map. Then why aren't more people working to prevent it? Because too many powerful people believe a war would serve their interests, Manning replied. Military leaders seeking glory, industrialists seeing profit, politicians exploiting nationalist sentiment. He looked directly at Beatrice. Your Empress is one of the few monarchs who truly understands the catastrophe that would follow. Which is why we need to get this information to her without delay, Beatrice insisted. Manning nodded. Of course. If you'll show me the documents, Dr. Romanov, I'll have my staff prepare the most urgent points for telegraph transmission. Yuri hesitated, glancing at Beatrice. The full documents are too sensitive to transmit, she said carefully. We'll prepare a summary of the essential information. A flash of something, annoyance? Disappointment crossed Manning's face before his diplomatic mask returned. As you wish. And intercepting genuine intelligence, Manning confirmed. Your Empress has been operating with an incomplete picture for months. The armed men moved further into the room, their weapons trained on Beatrice and Yuri. Beatrice assessed their options quickly. 3 armed men plus Manning, who likely was also armed. The windows behind the desk were too small for escape. The only exit was the door now blocked by Henderson and his men. What happens now? Yuri asked, his voice steady despite the danger. Now. Manning leaned back in his chair. Now we relieve you of those troublesome documents, then arrange a regrettable accident for an Imperial Guard captain and a scholar who ventured too far from Vienna. Perhaps a robbery gone wrong. Budapest can be dangerous for foreign visitors. You won't succeed, Beatrice said firmly. Others know what we've discovered. Elena laughed softly. A bluff, Captain? I expected better. Lieutenant Parker has a sealed letter with all the information, to be delivered directly to the Empress if we don't return. It wasn't entirely true. Parker's letter contained suspicions but not specifics, but Beatrice maintained an unflinching gaze. Doubt flickered across Manning's face. Search them, he ordered the guards. Get those documents. As the first guard approached, Beatrice made her decision. In one fluid motion, she fired at the overhead chandelier, sending glass and metal raining down as the room plunged into semi-darkness. Using the momentary confusion, she grabbed Yuri and pulled him down behind Manning's heavy desk as return fire erupted. The window, she hissed, using the desk for cover. Too small, Yuri protested. Not that one. Beatrice pointed to the floor-to-ceiling curtains on the far wall. Behind those. Understanding dawned on Yuri's face. While Manning and his men regrouped on the other side of the room, Beatrice and Yuri crawled quickly toward the curtains. Pulling them aside revealed a glass door leading to a small balcony overlooking the consulate gardens. Bullets splintered the desk behind them as Beatrice fired back, buying time as Yuri wrestled with the balcony door lock. Hurry! It's jammed, Yuri grunted, throwing his weight against it. With a crack, the lock gave way, and they tumbled onto the balcony just as more shots rang out behind them. The balcony stood about 15 feet above a manicured lawn. Without hesitation, Beatrice swung her legs over the railing. Jump! Yuri followed her over the edge. They hit the ground hard, Beatrice rolling to absorb the impact as she'd been trained. Yuri landed less gracefully but was quickly on his feet. This way, Beatrice directed, leading him toward a stand of trees that would provide cover. Behind them, shouting erupted from the balcony as Manning ordered his men into pursuit. They raced across the consulate grounds toward the perimeter wall. Guards at the main gate were already responding to the commotion, running toward the main building. We'll never make it through the gate, Yuri panted as they reached the shelter of the trees. Beatrice scanned the wall. It was high, topped with decorative but functional iron spikes. Difficult but not impossible. There, she pointed to where a large oak grew near the wall. We can climb up and over. The tree's lower branches provided easy access, and they quickly ascended until they reached a limb extending over the wall. Below, they could hear guards searching the grounds, voices calling out in English and Hungarian. Ladies first, Yuri said with a gallows humor that surprised Beatrice. She maneuvered out onto the branch until she was positioned above the wall, then dropped down onto the narrow stone top, carefully avoiding the iron spikes. Yuri followed, his scholarly coordination proving surprisingly adequate for the task. From the wall, they jumped down to a quiet side street beyond the consulate grounds. Without pausing to check for pursuit, Beatrice led them away at a brisk walk, not running but moving purposefully to avoid drawing attention. Where are we going? Yuri asked when they'd put several blocks between themselves and the consulate. We need to get out of Budapest immediately, Beatrice replied, guiding them toward the commercial district. Manning will alert his contacts throughout the city. Every hotel, train station, and dock will be watched. Then how do we escape? Beatrice turned down a narrow alley, checking to ensure they weren't followed before answering. I have a contact here. Someone outside official channels who might help us. Another spy. A former soldier who served under my father. Beatrice paused at an intersection, orienting herself. He runs a tavern near the river. If he's still alive, and if he remembers me, he might provide assistance. The tavern, when they found it, was a weathered establishment tucked between warehouses along the Danube. A faded sign depicting a crossed sword and quill hung above the door. Inside, the afternoon crowd was sparse, a few dock workers, a table of card players, and an old man behind the bar polishing glasses. Beatrice approached the bar, Yuri close behind her. "I'm looking for Mikhail Kovacs," she said in Hungarian. The old man looked up, his rheumy eyes narrowing as he studied her face. "Kovacs retired 5 years ago. I bought the place from him." His gaze lingered on her uniform. "Imperial Guard?" "Long way from Vienna." "I'm looking for information about a former Imperial soldier," Beatrice pressed. "Fearing Ellis's unit, Carpathian Border Regiment." At the mention of her father's name, the old man's expression changed. "Wait here," he said, disappearing through a door behind the bar. Moments later, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a grey-streaked beard emerged. Despite his advancing years, he moved with a soldier's economy of motion. A long scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, puckering the skin around his eye. "Who's asking about Fearing Ellis?" he demanded gruffly. Beatrice stepped forward. "His daughter, Beatrice." The man stared at her intently, then barked a laugh. "By God, it is you! Little B.A., all grown up and wearing the Imperial green." He came around the bar and clasped her arms in a warrior's greeting. "Last time I saw you, you were no higher than my sword belt, watching your father drill the recruits." "Mikhail," Beatrice said with genuine warmth. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me. Remember the colonel's daughter who could outshoot half his men by age 12? How could I forget?" His smile faded as he noticed her torn sleeve and the bloodstain beneath. "You're in trouble." "Yes. And we need your help." She gestured to Yuri. "This is Dr. Yuri Romanov. We're carrying information vital to the Empress, but certain parties are trying to prevent its delivery." Mikhail studied Yuri briefly, then nodded toward the back room. "Come. We can talk privately." In a small office behind the bar, Beatrice quickly explained their situation, omitting specific details about the documents but emphasizing the danger they faced and the importance of reaching Vienna. Mikhail listened without interruption, his scarred face impassive. When she finished, he leaned back in his creaking chair. "The British, eh? Never trust an empire older than your own, that's what your father used to say." He rose and locked the office door, then moved to a cabinet from which he extracted a bottle of Palinka and 3 glasses. After pouring the potent fruit brandy, he raised his glass. "To Fearing. A good soldier and a better man." They drank, the fiery liquid burning a path down Beatrice's throat. Mikhail set his glass down with finality. "I'll help you. Not just for Fearing's memory, but because I've no love for conspirators and assassins. Lost my eye and half my face to a Serbian bomb in '89. Relief flooded through Beatrice. "Thank you, Mikhail. We need to reach Vienna without using official transportation. All stations and docks will be watched." Mikhail nodded thoughtfully. "There's a grain barge leaving for Bratislava tonight. The captain owes me a favor. From there, you could take the local train to Vienna, less scrutiny than the express." "Will the barge captain keep quiet?" Yuri asked. "For enough money, yes. And the threat of what I'll do to him if he doesn't." Mikhail grinned, the expression pulling his scar tight. "You can rest here until nightfall. I'll make the arrangements." As Mikhail left to speak with the barge captain, Beatrice finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Yuri sat heavily in a chair opposite her, the events of the day clearly taking their toll. "You never mentioned your father was a colonel," he said after a moment. "It wasn't relevant to the mission," Beatrice replied, though she knew the answer sounded evasive. "It's relevant to understanding you," Yuri said quietly. "Just as my father being a physician helps explain me." Beatrice met his gaze. There was something in his eyes, not pity, which she would have resented. As the vessel pulled away from Budapest, Beatrice stood at the stern, watching the city lights recede. Yuri joined her, the cool night air carrying the scent of the river. "We made it," he said quietly. "Out of Budapest, yes. But the real challenge awaits in Vienna." She turned to him. "Once we deliver the documents, your life will change. Men with powerful friends will be arrested. Some will hang for treason. Others will escape punishment but never forget who exposed them. Are you suggesting I should fear retribution? I'm suggesting you should understand the consequences." Beatrice looked directly into his eyes. "This isn't academic research anymore, Yuri. It's life and death, yours included." It was the first time she'd used his given name. The intimacy of it hung between them in the night air. "I knew the risks when I began this research," he replied. "I accept them now." His hand found hers in the darkness. "We're in this together, Beatrice." She didn't pull away as his fingers intertwined with hers. Instead, she allowed herself to draw strength from the connection, from the shared danger and purpose that had unexpectedly bound them together. As the barge continued its journey up the Danube, carrying its cargo of grain and secrets toward Vienna, Beatrice Ellis realized that somewhere between the palace library and this moment, Dr. Yuri Romanov had become more than a colleague in her mission. He had become essential to it, and perhaps, though she wasn't ready to admit it, to her as well. The Danube harvest reached Bratislava without incident, slipping into the busy port as evening fell the following day. True to Mikhail's assurances, the barge captain asked no questions and kept their presence hidden during the routine customs inspection. As they disembarked, Beatrice surveyed the riverfront cautiously. Bratislava, then known officially as Pressburg, was the coronation city of Hungarian kings and still an important administrative center within the empire. Less grand than Budapest or Vienna, it nonetheless offered both opportunities and dangers for travelers seeking to remain undetected. "We'll need to find lodging for the night," Yuri said as they walked away from the docks. "The local train to Vienna doesn't depart until morning." Beatrice nodded, guiding them toward the old town where smaller inns might ask fewer questions than the grand hotels near the castle. Her arm ached where the bullet had grazed it, and exhaustion from their cramped quarters on the barge weighed heavily on them both. They found a modest establishment on a side street, its weathered sign depicting a crown and grapes. The innkeeper, a heavy-set woman with shrewd eyes, accepted their story of being a married couple traveling to visit family in Vienna without comment, though her gaze lingered briefly on Beatrice's poorly concealed uniform beneath her borrowed coat. Their room was small but clean, with a single bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking a quiet courtyard. Beatrice checked the lock twice, then examined the window for potential escape routes before allowing herself to relax marginally. "You should rest," Yuri said, noticing her fatigue. "I'll keep watch first." "We both need sleep," Beatrice admitted. "But first, let me check your documents. After everything that's happened, we should ensure they are still intact." Yuri carefully removed the satchel from within his jacket and opened it on the small table by the window. The papers appeared undamaged, their damning evidence still legible. "All present," he confirmed, leafing through the folders. "Names, dates, financial records, the assassination plans for Sarajevo, everything we need to convince the Empress." "Good." Beatrice sat heavily on the edge of the bed, finally allowing her exhaustion to show. "Tomorrow we reach Vienna, and this will be in safer hands." Yuri repacked the documents, then hesitated. "There's only one bed. I can sleep on the floor." Despite everything, Beatrice found herself smiling at his consideration. "We're supposedly married, remember? The floor is unnecessary." She removed her boots and outer clothing but kept her undergarments on. "I promise not to compromise your virtue, Doctor." A flush crept up Yuri's neck, but he smiled in return. "My virtue appreciates your restraint, Captain." They settled awkwardly onto opposite sides of the narrow bed, a careful space maintained between them. Despite her exhaustion, Beatrice found sleep elusive, acutely aware of Yuri's presence beside her. "Beatrice," he said softly after several minutes of silence. "May I ask you something personal?" You seem fond of personal questions, she replied, but without answer. Life-threatening situations tend to prompt reflection, he said. When this is over, what happens next for you? The question caught her off guard. In truth, she hadn't thought beyond completing their mission. I return to my duties guarding the Empress, I suppose. And that's enough? After uncovering a conspiracy that could change the course of history. She turned to face him in the dim light filtering through the curtains. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking if you've ever wanted more from life than duty. His voice was gentle but probing. Have you never considered what you might do if not bound by oath to the imperial household? No one had asked her such a question in years. The answer that came to her mind surprised even herself. I used to dream of traveling. Not as a guard or a soldier, but as an explorer. Africa, Asia, the Americas. Places where history is still being written. You'd be remarkable at it, Yuri said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Captain Beatrice Ellis, Imperial explorer, discovering ancient civilizations and mapping uncharted territories. What about you? She asked, deflecting attention from her unexpected confession. Back to the library and academic papers after all this excitement. Yuri was quiet for a moment. I don't think I can go back to merely studying history after being part of making it, he admitted. This experience has changed something fundamental in me. I see now that knowledge without action is incomplete. So what will you do? I'm not certain yet. But I know I want my work to have direct impact. Perhaps the foreign ministry, or even diplomatic service. He paused. Assuming, of course, we survive long enough for any of this to matter. The reminder of their precarious situation hung between them. On impulse, Beatrice reached across the space separating them and found his hand. We'll survive, she said with more conviction than she felt. We've come this far. His fingers tightened around hers. Yes, we have. They fell asleep that way, hands joined across the narrow gap between them, a bridge neither had expected to build. Morning brought grey skies and a light rain that shrouded Bratislava in mist. After a simple breakfast in the inn's small dining room, Beatrice and Yuri made their way to the train station, vigilant for any sign they were being followed. The local train to Vienna was less grand than the Imperial Express, with wooden seats and carriages that had seen better days. They found seats in a compartment already occupied by an elderly couple and a young mother with a sleeping infant. As the train pulled away from the station, Beatrice allowed herself a small hope that the worst was behind them. Vienna was only hours away. By nightfall, the documents could be in the Empress's hands. The train rumbled through the countryside, passing small villages and fields where farmers worked despite the drizzling rain. Beside her, Yuri dozed intermittently, the satchel secure between them. Beatrice remained alert, studying each passenger who walked past their compartment, noting the guard who checked tickets, watching for anything unusual. They were halfway to Vienna when the train slowed unexpectedly, grinding to a halt at a small rural station not marked on their route. Unscheduled stop, Yuri murmured, instantly awake. Mechanical issue. Beatrice watched as railway officials conferred on the platform. Perhaps. Or perhaps not. Minutes later, their suspicions were confirmed when two men in the uniforms of Austrian border police entered their carriage. They moved methodically from compartment to compartment, examining papers and occasionally questioning passengers. Border control this far inside the empire is unusual, Beatrice said quietly. They're looking for us. The elderly gentleman across from them looked up with interest. Trouble with revolutionaries again? These socialists are becoming a plague on decent society. Beatrice forced a polite smile. I'm sure it's merely a precaution. As the officers approached their compartment, she quickly assessed their options. Running would confirm their identity. Fighting would endanger the other passengers. Their only choice was to bluff their way through. Follow my lead, she whispered to Yuri as the compartment door slid open. Papers, please, the senior officer requested in German, his gaze sweeping over the occupants. Beatrice presented the travel documents Elena had provided in Vienna, which identified her as Elizabeth Müller, a merchant's wife traveling with her husband, Heinrich. The officer examined them carefully. The young mother across from them suddenly spoke, her German now perfect and aristocratic rather than provincial. "The Baron's plan is sound, Captain. The palace has been informed of your approach. Countermeasures are in place." Beatrice stared at the woman, realization dawning. "You're all Imperial agents." "Indeed," the Baroness confirmed with a slight smile. "The child is real, though not hers. A necessary prop for our cover." The next station came into view, a tiny platform serving a rural village. As the train slowed, Baron Lena rose. "Quickly now. Our carriage will be waiting." Following the Baron's lead, they disembarked onto the rain-slick platform. True to his word, an elegant carriage bearing the Lena family crest waited nearby, the driver alert and ready. As they settled inside, Beatrice remained vigilant, her hand never far from her weapon. Trust came difficult after the betrayal in Budapest. "You're wise to remain cautious," the Baron observed as the carriage pulled away. "But I assure you, Captain, our loyalty to the Empress is absolute. Your father's reputation precedes you, as does Dr. Romanov's scholarly brilliance." "How did you find us?" Yuri asked. "Mikhail Kovac sent word through old channels after you left Budapest," the Baroness explained. "We've been monitoring all possible routes to Vienna since then. And the border officers on the train." Beatrice pressed. "Genuine, I'm afraid," Baron Lena replied. "But predictable. We knew they would begin inspections from the front of the train, giving us time to assess you before they reached our compartment." The carriage traveled swiftly along country roads, eventually turning onto a tree-lined drive leading to an impressive country estate. Stone walls surrounded manicured grounds, and the house itself was an elegant example of Baroque architecture, though more modest than the great palaces of Vienna. Inside, servants moved efficiently, bringing refreshments and dry clothes while maintaining a discreet distance. The Baron led them to his study, a wood-paneled room lined with books and maps, where a fire had been lit to ward off the chill of the rainy afternoon. "You can rest here briefly," he said. "Fresh horses are being readied for the journey to Vienna. You'll depart after nightfall with an armed escort." "How far are we from the city?" Beatrice asked, accepting a glass of wine from a servant. "Approximately 2 hours by carriage," the Baroness replied. "You should reach the palace well before midnight." For the first time in days, Beatrice allowed herself to believe they might actually succeed. The documents were intact, their identities confirmed by seemingly trustworthy allies, and Vienna was within reach. After the Baroness left to oversee preparations for their departure, Baron Lena turned to Yuri with scholarly interest. "Your research has caused quite a stir in certain circles, Doctor. Few believe the conspiracy extended so deeply into our own government." "The evidence is irrefutable," Yuri replied. "Financial transactions, correspondence, meeting records, all pointing to coordinated efforts to provoke war with Serbia." "And the British involvement?" the Baron inquired. "That was unexpected, even to those of us who spent decades in the intelligence service." "Britain fears a strong Central Europe," Beatrice interjected. "A Austro-Hungarian German alliance threatens their dominance." The Baron nodded thoughtfully. "The great game of empires continues, with smaller nations as the playing pieces." He sighed, suddenly looking every year of his advanced age. "I fear the coming century will not be kind to the old order." A servant entered with a message, which the Baron read quickly. "Good news. The route to Vienna has been secured. Imperial Guards loyal to the Empress have established checkpoints to ensure your safe passage." As night fell, they prepared to depart. The Baron provided Beatrice with a loaded cavalry pistol to replace the ammunition she had expended in Budapest, and fresh bandages for her arm. For Yuri, a secure leather case with a hidden compartment for the documents. "One final piece of advice," Baron Lena said as they stood by the waiting carriage. "Trust no one at court until you've spoken directly with the Empress. The conspiracy may reach higher than even your documents suggest." "We understand," Beatrice assured him. And thank you for your assistance. It is I who should thank you both, the Baron replied solemnly. The Empire has stood for centuries. With God's grace and your courage, it may yet survive the storms gathering around us. With those words of caution, they departed for Vienna, the carriage moving swiftly through the rainy night. For mounted guards accompanied them, alert for any threat along the darkened roads. Beside her in the carriage, Yuri sat silently, the weight of their mission evident in his pensive expression. Impulsively, Beatrice reached for his hand. We're almost there, she said softly. A few more hours and it will be done. He interlaced his fingers with hers, drawing strength from the contact. And then? The question held more meaning than its simple words suggested. Beatrice wasn't ready to answer what might come after, not for the Empire, and certainly not for the unexpected connection that had formed between a scholar and a soldier. Then we complete our duty, she said finally. The rest will follow. The lights of Vienna appeared in the distance, a glittering promise of civilization amid the darkness. Within those lights lay the culmination of their journey, and whatever future awaited them both. Vienna at night was a city transformed. Gas lamps illuminated grand boulevards designed during the recent modernization, while the older districts maintained their medieval character, shadows and light playing across ancient stone. The carriage passed through the outer districts without incident, the imperial checkpoints Baron Lena had mentioned allowing them through with minimal delay. As they approached the Ringstrasse, the grand circular road surrounding the inner city, Beatrice noticed increased military presence. Imperial guards patrolled in pairs, and police checkpoints had been established at major intersections. The Empress must have mobilized the palace guard, she observed, recognizing the distinctive uniforms of her own regiment. Is that normal? Yuri asked, peering through the carriage window. No. Something's happened. Beatrice leaned forward, addressing one of their mounted escorts. Lieutenant, what's the situation in the city? Attempted assassination at the Opera House, Captain, the man replied grimly. A foreign minister was shot 3 hours ago. The whole inner city is under lockdown. Beatrice felt a chill run down her spine. Which minister? Count Berchtold. Foreign minister. The same minister who had warned her to keep the Empress safe before this mission began. It couldn't be coincidence. Is he alive? Yuri asked. Wounded but stable, from what I heard, the lieutenant reported. The assassin was killed trying to escape. As they continued toward the palace, the security measures intensified. Twice they were stopped and their identities verified against written orders bearing the imperial seal. Each time, Beatrice grew more concerned about the extraordinary precautions. Finally, the Hofburg Palace came into view, its massive facade illuminated against the night sky. Instead of approaching the main entrance, their escort directed the carriage to a lesser-known side gate used primarily by servants and guards. Why aren't we using the main entrance? Beatrice questioned. Orders, Captain, the lieutenant replied. All movements in and out of the palace are to be conducted with maximum discretion. The side gate opened as they approached, revealing a contingent of imperial guards who immediately surrounded the carriage. Beatrice recognized their commander, Captain Stefan Wagner, her counterpart in the Empress's secondary guard detail. Captain Ellis, Wagner greeted her as she disembarked. Your return is most timely. The Empress has been asking for you hourly since the attack on Count Berchtold. I need to see her immediately, Beatrice replied. We have critical information. Wagner's expression was grave. She's in secure chambers with the Emperor and the War Council. I'll escort you there personally. As they followed Wagner through servant corridors and hidden passages designed for the royal family's emergency use, Beatrice maintained heightened awareness. Despite being back in the palace, surrounded by imperial guards, she couldn't shake the feeling that danger still lurked nearby. The assassination attempt, she said to Wagner as they walked. What do you know about the shooter? Serbian nationalist, according to initial reports, Wagner replied. But something feels wrong about it. The security breach was too convenient, the assassin too easily identified. Beatrice exchanged a meaningful glance with Yuri. If their information was correct, that Serbian nationalist was likely a pawn in a much larger game. They reached an ornate door guarded by four elite Imperial Guardsmen. Wagner presented credentials, and after a thorough identification check, they were admitted. As the evidence mounted, faces around the table registered shock, anger, and in a few cases, poorly concealed fear. General Hagel attempted to leave at one point but was detained by Imperial Guards at a nod from the Emperor. When they finished, the Emperor sat in silence for a long moment, his weathered hands resting on the documents before him. In 66 years on the throne, he said finally, I have never encountered treachery of this magnitude. If verified, these accusations will require the most severe response. They can be verified, Your Majesty, Yuri affirmed. Bank records, intercepted communications, witness testimonies, all corroborate the conspiracy. The Emperor turned to his closest advisor, Prince Constantine Montenuovo, the Lord Chamberlain of the Imperial household. Your assessment, Prince? Montenuovo, a shrewd diplomat known for his conservative views, stroked his beard thoughtfully. The evidence appears substantial, Your Majesty. I recommend immediate but discreet action to secure those implicated while further verification is conducted. Agreed. The Emperor rose, his decision made. General Hagel will be detained pending investigation. All military movements toward the Serbian border are to be halted immediately. The planned visit of Archduke Franz Ferdinand to Sarajevo will be postponed indefinitely. He turned to Beatrice and Yuri. Captain Ellis, Dr. Romanov, you have performed an invaluable service to the Empire. Your courage and loyalty will be appropriately recognized. As Imperial Guards led the protesting General Hagel from the chamber, the Emperor continued issuing orders to contain the conspiracy and prevent any immediate escalation toward war. Officials hurried to execute his commands, leaving only the Imperial couple, Beatrice and Yuri, in the suddenly quiet room. The Empress approached them, her expression softening from Imperial authority to genuine gratitude. You've both endured much to bring us this information. The Empire owes you a debt that cannot easily be repaid. We did our duty, Your Majesty, Beatrice replied formally. Above and beyond duty, I think. The Empress smiled faintly. You should rest now. Lady Charlotte will show you to suitable accommodations. Tomorrow, we will speak more privately about your experiences and your future. As they followed Charlotte from the chamber, Beatrice felt the weight of the past days finally beginning to lift. The documents were delivered, the conspiracy exposed, immediate war averted. Yet beneath her professional satisfaction lurked a more personal uncertainty about what would come next, not just for the Empire, but for herself and the scholarly man who had somehow become essential to her world. Beatrice woke the following morning in luxurious guest quarters within the palace, momentarily disoriented by the soft bed and elegant surroundings after days of danger and improvised accommodations. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a room fit for visiting nobility. A soft knock at the door revealed a palace maid bearing breakfast and a message from the Empress requesting her presence at noon. After days of constant vigilance, the simple act of bathing and dining in peace felt almost unnatural. When she had finished her meal, Beatrice found a fresh uniform laid out for her, identical to her usual Imperial Guard attire but newly made, with her rank insignia already in place. The thoughtfulness of the gesture spoke volumes about the Empress's attention to detail and care for those who served her. Dressed and feeling more herself, Beatrice left her chambers to find Yuri. A page directed her to an adjacent guest suite where she found him already dressed in new clothes provided by the palace, a well-tailored suit that gave him the appearance of a diplomat rather than a scholar. Captain, he greeted her with a warm smile. You look considerably better than the last time I saw you. As do you, Doctor, she returned, surprised by how pleased she was to see him. It seems our ordeal has officially ended. The immediate danger, perhaps, Yuri agreed, gesturing for her to enter his sitting room. But the implications of what we've uncovered are just beginning to unfold. He showed her a morning newspaper delivered with his breakfast. The headlines announced the arrest of multiple high-ranking military officers and government officials on charges of treason. Count Berchtold's condition was reported as stable, while the official story attributed the assassination attempt to a lone Serbian extremist. They're keeping the full conspiracy quiet, Beatrice observed. For now, Yuri agreed. Publicly acknowledging British involvement would create an international incident when the Empire can least afford it. What do you think will happen next? Before Yuri could answer, another knock came at his door. Lady Charlotte entered, her usually composed features animated with urgency. "Captain Ellis, Dr. Romanov," she said without preamble, "the Empress requests your immediate presence in her private study. Something unexpected has developed." Exchanging concerned glances, they followed Charlotte through the palace corridors. Imperial guards were stationed at unusually frequent intervals, and Beatrice noted that all were men she knew personally from her own regiment, trusted soldiers whose loyalty was beyond question. The Empress's private study was a room Beatrice knew well from her years of service. Unlike the formal staterooms used for official business, this was where Theodora conducted her most confidential affairs of state. When they entered, they found the Empress seated at her writing desk, examining documents with evident concern. Beside her stood Prince Montenuovo, his expression grave. "Captain, Doctor," the Empress acknowledged them, setting aside her papers. "Thank you for coming so promptly. We have a situation that requires your particular expertise." "How may we serve, Your Majesty?" Beatrice asked, standing at attention. "This arrived by special courier an hour ago," the Empress said, indicating a letter bearing the diplomatic seal of the British Empire. An official communication from the British ambassador expressing his government's deep concern over the arrest of several Austro-Hungarian officials known to be friendly to British interests. "They're testing our knowledge," Yuri observed. "Trying to determine how much we've uncovered about their involvement." "Precisely," Prince Montenuovo confirmed. "The communication contains veiled threats regarding the potential misunderstandings that could damage relations between our empires. Diplomatic language for tread carefully or face consequences," the Empress added with a hint of steel in her voice. "They believe they still hold leverage over us." "Do they?" Beatrice asked directly. The Empress and Montenuovo exchanged glances. "Possibly," the prince admitted. "Our investigation has revealed that Theodore Manning was not the only British operative within our borders. We've identified at least 3 others in positions of influence, but suspect there are more we haven't yet discovered. Furthermore," the Empress continued, "we have reason to believe they've placed agents close to the Archduke's household. Though we've postponed his Sarajevo visit, he remains a target." Beatrice immediately understood the implications. "You want us to identify these remaining agents?" "Yes," the Empress confirmed. "But with absolute discretion. Any official investigation would alert them and potentially accelerate their plans. You're uniquely positioned for this task," Montenuovo explained. "Captain Ellis is known and trusted throughout the imperial household and military. Dr. Romanov has the scholarly credentials to access diplomatic and academic circles without suspicion. Together, you've already demonstrated remarkable effectiveness." Beatrice glanced at Yuri, finding him already watching her with quiet determination. "We'll do whatever is required, Your Majesty," she answered for both of them. "Excellent." The Empress rose, signaling a shift from discussion to action. "Prince Montenuovo will provide all the intelligence we've gathered thus far. You'll report directly to me, bypassing normal channels." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "I understand this comes just as you've returned from considerable danger. If you require time to recover, that won't be necessary, Your Majesty," Yuri interjected respectfully. "The work is too important for delay." "I agree," Beatrice added. "We're ready to begin immediately." The Empress studied them both, a knowing look in her eyes. "Very well. There is, however, one additional matter." She turned to Lady Charlotte, who presented a small velvet box. "Captain Ellis, in recognition of your extraordinary service and courage, I am elevating you to the rank of Major within the Imperial Guard. This promotion comes with expanded authority and new responsibilities, including the formation of a special security detail under your direct command." Stunned, Beatrice accepted the box, which contained the insignia of her new rank. "I am deeply honored, Your Majesty." "And Dr. Romanov," The Empress continued, "You are appointed special advisor to the Crown on diplomatic intelligence, with access to all levels of government previously closed to you. Both appointments take effect immediately and have been approved personally by the Emperor." Yuri bowed deeply. "I will strive to be worthy of such trust, Your Imperial Majesty." The comparison startled Beatrice. "I hadn't considered the similarity, Your Majesty."
No?
"I find it interesting that you formed such a strong partnership with a man who embodies many of the qualities you most admired in your father." The Empress smiled slightly. "Though I suspect your feelings for Dr. Romanov have developed beyond professional respect." Heat rose to Beatrice's face. No need to respond, Major," the Empress said gently. "Your dedication to duty has always been absolute. But I would not have you believe that duty precludes personal happiness." She glanced meaningfully toward Yuri again. "Something to consider, perhaps, when this current crisis has passed." Before Beatrice could formulate a reply to this unexpected personal counsel, the Empress moved away to speak with other guests, leaving her to contemplate words that seemed to offer permission for possibilities she had scarcely allowed herself to imagine. The reception continued for another hour before guests began departing. As the crowd thinned, Yuri finally made his way to Beatrice's side, his relief at escaping academic discussion evident. "If I have to explain one more time that my research was historical, not political, I may resort to the combat techniques you demonstrated in Budapest," he murmured, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing servant. "Careful, Doctor. Violence doesn't become a special advisor to the Crown," she replied with a smile that came more naturally than she'd expected. "Neither does dying of boredom." He clinked his glass against hers. "To more stimulating conversations. Like planning how to identify British spies within the Archduke's household," she suggested wryly. "Exactly. Speaking of which," his voice lowered, "I've learned something interesting from Professor Bugman, who tutors the Archduke's children occasionally. Apparently, a new English governess joined the household just 3 months ago, highly recommended by the British ambassador's wife." Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "That warrants investigation." "My thoughts exactly. I've arranged to accompany Professor Bugman to the Archduke's residence tomorrow for a scholarly consultation regarding the children's education." Yuri looked rather pleased with himself. Academic credentials have their uses. "Impressive initiative, Advisor Romanov," Beatrice acknowledged, genuinely impressed by his quick thinking. "I'll focus on the security detail. As the new head of the Empress's Special Security Unit, I have legitimate reason to review all Imperial protection protocols, including the Archduke's." They continued discussing strategy as the reception concluded, their professional collaboration now infused with a personal understanding that made their partnership increasingly seamless. Neither mentioned the moment in the garden, yet both seemed aware that something had shifted between them, a recognition of possibilities that would need to be addressed when duty allowed. The following morning, Beatrice rose early and dressed in her formal uniform, the new rank insignia still unfamiliar beneath her fingers as she adjusted her collar. Her first official act as major would be to review the Archduke's security detail at the Belvedere Palace, his Vienna residence when the court was in season. As she prepared to leave, a knock at her door revealed a palace page bearing a note from Yuri. The message was brief but clear: "Exercise caution today. My academic contacts suggest the Archduke may not welcome scrutiny of his household arrangements. He values his independence from his uncle's court." The warning was valuable. Franz Ferdinand's strained relationship with Emperor Franz Joseph was well known in court circles, rooted in the Archduke's morganatic marriage to Sophie Chotek, a woman of noble but not royal blood. The Emperor had only consented to the marriage on condition that their children would be excluded from succession to the throne. This family tension created political complications as well. The Archduke had developed his own circle of advisors and confidants, some of whom advocated positions at odds with the Emperor's policies. It made him both a target for those seeking to destabilize the empire and potentially receptive to foreign influences that promised support for his future reign. Beatrice arrived at the Belvedere shortly after 9, the magnificent Baroque palace gleaming white against the morning sky. Unlike the Hofburg, which served as the official imperial residence, the Belvedere offered the Archduke and his family a measure of privacy and independence. At the guard station, she presented her credentials and new orders authorizing a comprehensive security review. The captain in charge, a career officer named Klaus Brenner, received her with professional courtesy that couldn't entirely mask his surprise at her rank. "Major Ellis," he acknowledged with a correct salute. "We weren't informed of an inspection today." "This isn't a formal inspection, Captain," Beatrice clarified. "Rather, a review of all Imperial security protocols following the attempt on Count Berchtold's life. The Empress is concerned about potential vulnerabilities in all royal residencies." Brenner nodded, though his expression remained guarded. "Of course. How may I assist you?" "I'll need to review your duty rosters for the past 6 months, security incident reports, and the personnel files for any staff added to the detail during that period." She maintained a brisk, professional tone that made clear she expected cooperation without debate. "That will require the Archduke's approval for the personnel files," Brenner replied. "Security protocols are under my authority, but staffing decisions are made by His Imperial Highness personally." "Then I suggest you request that approval immediately, Captain. This matter has the highest priority from the Empress herself." While Brenner went to seek the necessary authorization, Beatrice began reviewing the security logs and duty rosters he had provided. She noted with interest several personnel changes over the past 4 months, more than would be typical for an established security detail. "Forgive the delay, Major," Brenner said upon his return 20 minutes later. "His Imperial Highness is occupied with visitors this morning but has granted permission for you to review the security arrangements. However," he added with evident discomfort, "he requests that any concerns be brought directly to him before being included in your report to the Empress." The condition revealed much about the political tensions between uncle and nephew. "Understood, Captain. I will extend that courtesy to His Imperial Highness." Brenner then escorted her on a tour of the palace's security measures, guard positions, communication systems, protocols for visitors and deliveries. Throughout, Beatrice maintained a professional demeanor while cataloguing potential vulnerabilities and noting which guards appeared most alert versus those who seemed to view her inspection as a formality. As they passed through the eastern wing of the palace, Beatrice heard the sound of children's voices followed by a woman's laughter. The English governess Yuri had mentioned, perhaps. She made a mental note of the location, planning to find a reason to observe the woman later. "The family quarters are through there," Brenner explained, noticing her attention. "The Archduke is very protective of his children's privacy." "Understandably," Beatrice replied. "Are educational staff subjected to the same security screening as household staff?" "Of course. All palace employees are thoroughly vetted, including the new English governess." Brenner's expression tightened slightly. Miss Pembroke came with excellent references from the highest levels of society. But yes, she was vetted according to protocol. "I'd like to review her file as well," Beatrice said casually. "The Empress is particularly concerned about recent hires from foreign nations, given current tensions." "I'll add it to the files you've requested," Brenner agreed, though his tone suggested reluctance. "Now, if you'll follow me to the western perimeter." Their tour continued for another hour, during which Beatrice gathered valuable information about the physical security of the palace while noting that Brenner seemed increasingly uneasy as her questions became more specific about certain staff members. As they returned to the guard office, they encountered a group leaving the family wing, Professor Bugman, whom Beatrice recognized from the reception, Yuri, carrying several books, and a tall, elegant woman in her 30s whom Beatrice instantly identified as the English governess. Miss Pembroke's posture and bearing spoke of privileged upbringing, while her attentive gaze suggested an intelligence beyond her role as a children's tutor. "Ah, Dr. Romanov," Beatrice greeted him with professional cordiality. "I didn't expect to encounter you here." Yuri smiled pleasantly. "Major Ellis. What a coincidence. I've been consulting with Professor Bugman on educational materials for the Archduke's children." He turned to the English woman. "Miss Pembroke, may I introduce Major Beatrice Ellis of the Imperial Guard?" "Major, this is Miss Catherine Pembroke, governess to the Archduke's children." "A pleasure, Major," Miss Pembroke said in flawless German with only the slightest English accent. "We so rarely see female officers in the palace. It's quite refreshing." The Major has just been promoted for exceptional service to the Empress, Yuri explained, his tone conversational but his eyes conveying a warning to Beatrice. She's implementing new security protocols throughout the imperial residencies. How fascinating, Miss Pembroke replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Though I hope it won't disrupt the children. The Hofburg Palace was in a state of controlled chaos when they arrived. Imperial guards moved with heightened vigilance through corridors where courtiers gathered in whispered clusters, speculation passing from person to person with the speed of sparrows in flight. Lady Charlotte led them directly to the Empress's private study, bypassing the usual protocols of announcement. Inside, they found not only the Empress but also the Emperor himself, a rare indication of the situation's gravity. Prince Montenuovo stood nearby, his usually impassive face tight with concern, while several senior military officers conferred in the corner. Major Ellis, Dr. Romanov, the Empress acknowledged them immediately. We have a crisis developing. 20 minutes ago, an attempt was made on Archduke Franz Ferdinand's life as he returned to the Belvedere from a military review. Beatrice felt her blood chill. Is His Imperial Highness injured? Mercifully, no, the Emperor answered, his voice steady despite his evident distress. The assassin was intercepted by security before he could get close enough. But this attempt came perilously close to succeeding. The method bears striking similarities to the attack on Count Berchtold, Prince Montenuovo elaborated. A lone gunman, apparently Serbian, who gained access to a restricted area through detailed knowledge of security protocols. Too detailed, the Empress added pointedly. Knowledge that could only come from someone inside the Archduke's household or security detail. Yuri exchanged a significant glance with Beatrice. We've identified several suspicious individuals within the Belvedere staff, Your Majesties. Most notably the English governess, Catherine Pembroke, and 3 recently hired security officers. We believe they're part of the same network we encountered in Budapest, Beatrice continued. British intelligence operating in coordination with Serbian nationalists to provoke a crisis that could lead to war. The Emperor's weathered face hardened. You have evidence of this British involvement? Circumstantial but compelling, Beatrice replied. We were planning to intercept communication between Miss Pembroke and her handlers tomorrow morning. That may now be too late, the Empress said gravely. The Archduke is demanding immediate military action against Serbia in response to this second attempt. He's convinced the Serbian government is directly responsible. Exactly the reaction our conspirators want, Yuri observed. If Austria-Hungary attacks Serbia, Russia will respond, drawing in Germany, then France. And the continent burns while Britain observes from its island sanctuary, the Emperor finished, his understanding of the larger geopolitical game evident. We must prevent this, but without proof of British involvement, I cannot restrain the war faction much longer. Prince Montenuovo stepped forward. Your Majesties, I believe we must take direct action. If we cannot wait for these conspirators to reveal themselves, we must force their hand. What do you propose? The Empress asked. A controlled deception, Montenuovo replied, turning to include Beatrice and Yuri in the discussion. We announce that new evidence regarding the assassination attempt has been discovered, evidence so significant that the Archduke himself will present it at an emergency session of the Imperial Council tomorrow evening. Bait, Beatrice realized immediately. To force them into action. Precisely, Montenuovo confirmed. We make it known through carefully chosen channels that this evidence will conclusively identify the true orchestrators of both assassination attempts. If our suspicions are correct, the conspirators will have no choice but to act before their scheme is exposed. But this puts the Archduke at genuine risk, Yuri objected. They might attempt a more desperate measure. Not if we control the environment completely, Beatrice countered, already thinking strategically. We announce the emergency council but hold it in the Hofburg rather than the usual chambers. We select the security personnel ourselves, establish our own perimeter, and monitor all access. And the Archduke, the Emperor asked, clearly concerned for his nephew despite their political differences. With your permission, Your Majesty, I would recommend that the Archduke remain here in the palace under the protection of guards I personally select, Beatrice replied. Meanwhile, we allow controlled information to leak suggesting his returning to the Belvedere to gather the evidence before tomorrow's council. The Emperor and Empress exchanged looks, a lifetime of partnership allowing for silent communication. After a moment, the Emperor nodded. Very well. Prince Montenuovo will coordinate with you both on the details. But remember, the stakes could not be higher. If we fail to expose these conspirators conclusively, Europe may still march to war despite our best efforts. We understand, Your Majesty, Beatrice assured him, the weight of responsibility settling firmly on her shoulders. One more thing, the Empress added as they prepared to leave. Captain Brenner from the Archduke's security detail reported your inspection today, Major Ellis. He seemed particularly interested in your connection to Dr. Romanov. He questioned me as well about Major Ellis, Yuri confirmed. With more curiosity than seemed professional. Then perhaps Captain Brenner deserves closer scrutiny, the Emperor suggested. Include him in your plans, but reveal only what serves our purpose. After a detailed planning session with Prince Montenuovo, Beatrice and Yuri spent the remainder of the evening preparing for the operation. Trusted Imperial Guards were selected for key positions, while carefully crafted rumors about new evidence were strategically shared with courtiers known for their loose tongues and wide social connections. By midnight, the trap was set. The official announcement of an emergency council session had been made, with specific mention of new evidence regarding the assassination attempts. A carriage was scheduled to take the Archduke from the Hofburg to the Belvedere at noon the following day, a journey that would actually carry a disguised Imperial Guard while the real Archduke remained safely within the palace. Do you think they'll take the bait? Yuri asked as they concluded their preparations in a small strategy room off the main guard chamber. They have to, Beatrice replied, studying the map of potential intercept points along the carriage route. If they believe their entire operation is about to be exposed, they can't afford to wait. Yuri nodded, though concern still lined his face. And if Captain Brenner is indeed involved? Then he'll either attempt to warn the others or try to take action himself. Beatrice locked eyes with him. Either way, we'll be watching. A moment of silence fell between them, the unfinished personal conversation from earlier hanging in the air. Despite the danger and duty that surrounded them, Beatrice found herself unable to ignore the connection that had grown between them, a connection that transcended their professional partnership. Yuri, she began hesitantly, about what you said earlier, it doesn't require an answer now, he interrupted gently. I only wanted you to know how I feel, regardless of what tomorrow brings. But I want to answer, she insisted, surprising herself with the urgency she felt. These past days have changed me too. I've spent my life defining myself by duty alone, believing personal attachments were incompatible with my service. She took a deep breath. You've shown me otherwise, that connection can strengthen rather than weaken, that sharing burden and purpose with someone who understands both can make you more effective, not less. Hope kindled in Yuri's eyes. Are you saying, I'm saying that when this mission is complete, I want to explore whatever this is between us, Beatrice stated with the directness that characterized her approach to everything. Properly, without bullets and conspiracies interrupting. The smile that transformed Yuri's face warmed her in ways she hadn't expected. I would like that very much, Major Ellis. Then let's ensure we both survive tomorrow, Advisor Romanov. With that promise between them, they returned to their planning with renewed purpose, both understanding that their personal future depended first on securing that of the empire they served. Morning arrived with tense anticipation permeating the palace. The Archduke had been informed of the plan and, after initial resistance, had agreed to remain under protection within the Hofburg. His concern for his wife and children, who would also stay under Imperial Guard, ultimately overcame his desire to confront his would-be assassins directly. By 10 o'clock, Beatrice had positioned her handpicked guards throughout the palace and along the planned carriage route. Yuri, using his academic credentials as cover, had returned to the Belvedere to observe any unusual activity among the staff, particularly Miss Pembroke and Captain Brenner. Miss Pembroke received correspondence by diplomatic courier at 8 this morning, Yuri reported via a messenger who arrived at Beatrice's temporary command post near the palace stables. She appeared agitated after reading it and immediately sought a private audience with Captain Brenner. They spoke for approximately 10 minutes in the East Garden, away from other staff. The information confirmed their suspicions about both individuals. Any unusual movements of security personnel? Beatrice asked the messenger. Dr. Romanov reports that 3 officers have been reassigned from the Belvedere to positions along the route between the palaces. Their names match those on your list of suspects. Everything was proceeding as anticipated.